What if the epic clash of Achilles and Hector never happened, and the real story is buried under layers of pottery and ash? Scholars have spent centuries chasing a myth that may be half truth, half imagination, and the clues they've uncovered are more surprising than any poet could have imagined. The tale of the Trojan War has been told and retold for millennia. Homer's Iliad paints a picture of gods meddling, heroes dueling, and a city besieged for 10 brutal years. For most of history, that narrative was taken at face value, a blend of history and legend that seemed inseparable. Yet archaeology, linguistics, and modern scholarship have begun to peel back the layers, revealing a story that is both familiar and wildly different. Imagine standing on the windswept hills of northwestern Turkey, the same hills that once cradled a bustling port city. You hear the distant crash of waves against a rocky shore, and you can almost taste the salty air that would have filled the lungs of ancient traders. That place is Hisarlik, the site identified as Troy by Heinrich Schliemann in the late 1800s. For a long time, the name was just a romantic notion, a label slapped onto a mound of earth. But as excavations dug deeper, they uncovered walls, doors, and a massive gate that hinted at a city far more complex than any legend could capture. The first retention bump, the walls of Troy were rebuilt not once, not twice, but at least 6 times, each layer representing a different era of occupation. That means the city survived earthquakes, fires, and invasions, only to rise again much like a phoenix, but made of stone. When Schliemann first uncovered what he called Troy Roman II, he was convinced he had found the Homeric palace of Priam. His methods were aggressive. He used dynamite to blast through layers, hoping to expose treasure. Modern archaeologists cringe at the destruction, yet his discovery sparked a worldwide fascination that still fuels debate. The truth is, the level most likely associated with the war described by Homer is Troy VI, a fortified citadel that thrived around 1300 BC. Its massive walls, up to 10 meters thick, suggest a city of significant wealth and strategic importance. The second retention bump, the Trojan horse, may never have been a wooden beast at all, but a metaphor for a diplomatic treaty or a sudden influx of foreign troops. No contemporary source mentions a hollow horse. The image first appears in later Greek plays and Roman retellings. Archaeologists have found evidence of a sudden destruction layer at Troy VI: charred timber, collapsed walls, and a scattering of bronze weapons. Some scholars argue this is the smoking aftermath of a war, possibly the one Homer immortalized. Others point out that the destruction could have been caused by an earthquake, a common hazard in the region. The timing aligns with the late Bronze Age collapse, a period when several ancient civilizations experienced rapid decline, trade routes faltered, and societies were destabilized. The third retention bump, the late Bronze Age collapse, was not a single catastrophe but a cascade of events: climate change, famines, migrations, and the mysterious sea peoples who raided coastal cities across the eastern Mediterranean. If we step back from the ruins and look at the broader picture, the myth of a 10-year siege fits neatly into a pattern of conflict that was happening across the ancient world. Mycenaean Greece, the culture that produced the heroes of the Iliad, was itself a network of palace societies that relied heavily on trade and tribute. Their power peaked around 1300 BC, just as Troy VI was flourishing. The Mycenaeans built massive citadels at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos, each with cyclopean walls that rivaled those of Troy. The fourth retention bump, recent DNA studies on Mycenaean skeletons reveal a surprisingly diverse gene pool, indicating extensive movement of peoples across the Aegean and Anatolia. This suggests that the Mycenaeans were not isolated warriors, but participants in a complex web of exchange. The Homeric narrative emphasizes personal vendettas. Paris steals Helen, Menelaus demands her return, and a coalition of Greek kings sails across the sea. Yet the archaeological record hints at a different motive: control of trade routes. Troy sat at the mouth of the Dardanelles, a natural choke point linking the Aegean Sea to the Black Sea. Merchants from the north would have passed through, bringing timber, grain, and metals. A city that could tax or block that passage held immense strategic value. In the late Bronze Age, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia documented a city called Wilusa, widely accepted as an early reference to Ilios, the Greek name for Troy. Hittite tablets speak of a ruler named Alexandu, a name strikingly similar to the Greek Alexander, another name for Paris. These texts describe diplomatic exchanges, gifts, and occasional hostilities between Wilusa and the Hittite king. The correspondence suggests that Troy was a vassal or ally of a greater power, rather than an isolated city waiting for a Greek fleet. The fifth retention bump. The Hittite letters mention a great war that involved the Ahiawa, a term many scholars associate with Mycenaean Greeks. This could be the earliest external reference to a conflict that later blossomed into the Trojan saga. When we compare the literary epic to the material evidence, a pattern emerges. The Iliad dramatizes human emotions, pride, love, rage, while the archaeological record tells us about economics, politics, and environmental stress. Both are true in their own domains, but they speak different languages. The poet used the war to explore timeless themes, whereas the archaeologist reads the soil to reconstruct daily life. Consider the famous Mask of Agamemnon, a golden mask discovered in Mycenaean that dates to around 1550 BC. Its exquisite craftsmanship suggests a society with the resources to support elite warriors, yet there is no direct link to the specific individuals Homer names. The mask represents a class of people, elite warriors who could have led expeditions across the sea. Their existence supports the plausibility of a Mycenaean force capable of besieging a fortified city like Troy. The sixth retention bump. The so-called Palace of Nestor at Pylos contains a tablet inventory that lists bronze weapons, armor, and even a bronze horse, a term that could be a metaphor for a chariot unit rather than a wooden horse. If we accept that a Mycenaean coalition could have launched a raid on Troy, what would motivate them? The answer may lie in a combination of tribute, trade dominance, and the desire to display power. Ancient societies often used military action as a means of securing economic advantage, not just for personal glory. The myth of Helen as a prize fits neatly into that framework, a symbolic representation of a valuable commodity, perhaps a treaty or a trade agreement. Archaeologists have also uncovered evidence of a massive fire at Troy Via, dated to around 1190 BC, which aligns with the period many scholars assign to the historical Trojan War. The layer shows collapsed walls, charred beams, and a sudden abandonment of the city. Some argue the fire was the result of a siege, while others suggest an internal revolt or an accidental blaze. The timing coincides with a broader regional collapse, when many Bronze Age palaces fell, possibly due to a combination of drought, famine, and invasions by the Sea Peoples. The seventh retention bump. A recent analysis of pollen samples from the Troy region shows a sudden drop in agricultural activity around 1200 BC, indicating that the surrounding countryside may have been depopulated or abandoned during the same period. All these fragments, Hittite letters, Mycenaean tablets, stratigraphic layers, and environmental data paint a picture of a world in turmoil. Within that chaos, a city like Troy could have been attacked, sacked, and rebuilt multiple times. The mythic elements, gods intervening, heroic duels, a wooden horse can be seen as narrative devices that transform the complex geopolitical event into a story that resonated across centuries. When modern scholars reconstruct the real Trojan War, they do not discard Homer's poetry. They use it as a cultural artifact that reflects how ancient Greeks remembered and reinterpreted their past. The poem preserves a memory of conflict, even if the details are embellished. Archaeology provides the physical anchor, the hard evidence that grounds those memories in time and place. So what does the evidence ultimately tell us? It suggests that a war, or at least a series of violent encounters, likely occurred between a Mycenaean coalition and the city at Hisarlik. The conflict was probably driven by strategic control of trade routes, shifting alliances, and the broader systemic collapse of the Late Bronze Age. The dramatic narrative we know today is a layer of myth built atop those historical foundations, a story that survived because it spoke to universal human experiences. The final twist is that the Trojan War may never have been a single, neatly defined event. It could have been a protracted period of intermittent warfare, punctuated by brief truces, diplomatic marriages, and economic negotiations, much like modern conflicts that span decades. The image of a 10-year siege is a convenient literary condensation, a way to package a complex series of events into a memorable saga. What remains undeniable is that the ruins of Troy stand as a testament to resilience, and the poems of Homer stand as a testament to imagination. Together, they remind us that history and myth are intertwined strands of the same tapestry, each adding depth and color to the other. If you could travel back to the ancient Aegean, would you trust the words of a poet or the shards of a pot to tell you what really happened?